Awesome. So has anyone had a good time the last 2 days?
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Let's close this sucker down then. I've been told the record length for a closing Y presentation is 1 hour and 30 minutes, so I say challenge accepted. Especially the third time through my presentation, it really starts to click, so it's gonna be great. I was in advertising for about 8 years, and 4 years ago, I made the switch to product design. That's a whole other talk. But the last 4 years, I've been heads down. I did a lot of speaking in the advertising space, been on a bit of a hiatus for the last 4 years, so I'm very excited to sort of come and share with you what I've been working on. The last 2 years have been in AI, so I wanted to sort of show you, well, it's a bit of a journey we're gonna go on. So as a primer, I just want, since we're very visual people, I wanna show you things we do in our everyday lives and how AI may impact that. And that'll be a nice little foundation for us to move forward with. We all create stuff. This is mine and my wife's dog, and an Instagram little thing we're working on. But creating stuff for us, we're used to this sort of Photoshop, lots of buttons and tooling, and there can be a bit of a learning curve and understanding. If you apply AI to that, this is the work of London-based Mimo Adkin. On the left is a live video feed. On the right is AI that's been trained to only understand oceanscapes. So no matter what you show it, it's going to try to create an oceanscape. And if you change the model out to fire, it reproduces fire. And if you change it to flowers, it shows you flowers. There's no interface. It's all play and serendipity. It's not meant to replace what a Photoshop is, but it's an entire new way to invent. Search, sort, and filtering. There's been decades spent trying to get us to sort our photos and tag them. To much avail, no one really wants to actually do that. A lot of UI is based on not knowing about us, and we spend a lot of time search, sort, and filtering. Now on my phone, I can just search cat, and I get all the photos I've taken of my cat. It's great, saves me time. I could search even something as sophisticated as wine cellar, and the AI is able to actually pull out photos. Pretty accurate. There's some misnomers in there, but it shows me that. Croissants, I've eaten way more croissants than this, so maybe the algorithm's failing here. And then even it creates. This showed up on my phone like last week. I'm not a very emotional person, but the cat here is Murphy, he passed away last fall. I'm like about tearing up at my desk, so AI has succeeded in emotionally moving me where a lot of human beings haven't, so. Another interesting in the sorting realm, this is Mikado. His parents are Japanese cucumber farmers, and sorting cucumbers is actually a pretty complex thing. There's no nationwide standard. There's 9 different variants in how they sort them by, and his mom, during the peak season, spends 8 hours a day sorting these. So he took over 7,000 photos of cucumbers, had his mom help him label, and used an open source version of Google's TensorFlow and created this machine that sorts the cucumbers just as accurately as she does. And now she can spend more time doing the things she loves and not sorting cucumbers all day. And this is a great shot. It's Mikado in the back, and those are his parents there. Beautiful. Making decisions. This is our decision-making process in our brain is just super bizarre. We sort of fuzz together a bunch of logic and why we make decisions. Buying a car is a very tough one. This is some work I did for a TrueCar in which we didn't want to blow out search because it was pretty useful. We wanted to augment it with artificial intelligence. So, as a user, I could search for whatever I was looking for. In this instance, if I search for Mini, I get the results I want right away, but the AI uses the sort of dynamic decision tree and says, you search for Mini, the next best question is your price range. And if I answer the price range, you see it sorts down for me. And I could continue to see that refinement, and then it'll keep asking me questions and sort of based on the data of the site, it'll sort of keep refining the questions it asks me. And if I go too far down the path, I could just sort of rewind the conversation here and back out. This was a bit of a supposition. Buying a house is a very complex. You have sometimes you have 2 people, you have kids involved. we said, let's just make an app, take all those data sets and automated car and have it just show up at your house, pick you up and drive you around the neighborhood and show you houses that would be of interest to you, using transparent displays for that. And this one is, I can't show you the example that I want to show you. It's in the financial industry and it's under too many NDAs, but I have a fun abstract example. I mean, who doesn't want to be smarter? We created this concept called Cyrano, and if you're not familiar with Cyrano de Bergerac, he was this guy this sort of large-nosed guy that hid in the bushes and helped his friend gain the love of Roxanne, because he, as Christian, didn't know how to speak well, and Cyrano knew how to say all the right things, so Cyrano would hide in the bushes and sort of speak perfect things to him, and he would speak to Roxanne, and he gained her love. So we imagine it as this, we have these chat interfaces. We thought more in the service industry, but you have these conversations, and what if you had this Cyrano here on the right side that, as you talked, provided you insights into the conversation, things that were helpful for you. The more real-world example is in research analysts that we are working with. They're constantly chatting with clients about stocks and equities, and on the right-hand side, we can listen to that conversation and bring up information that's sort of about that conversation. And as a research analyst, I start to look like a superhero because I get sort of this great insight that's brought to me. All right, so that's some visual look at AI. The conversation that we need to deal with is this great debate. AI is a very fantastical scientific endeavor. It's got its controversies, it's got Hollywood sort of painting color to it as well. I mean, it's audacious to say we're going to replicate human cognition. On one side, it's going to end the world. Elon Musk said it's like summoning the demon. And on the other side, it's going to save the world and be great in rainbows. I think Stephen Hawking really nailed it. This is how I'm going to pitch all my future hedges on. It's going to be the greatest or worst thing that's ever happened to us. But I've been working in actual AI for the past 2 years, and I've seen this duality actually in the conversation. That great debate is only on theoretical of what AI maybe could be possibly someday. It has no bearing on the reality of what AI actually is today. And the reality is a lot less scarier when you start to unpack it. So I'm going to have us try to take that debate and push it to a side so we can take a more candid and actual look at AI and hopefully feel a little more empowered by it. Quick intro, my name is Matthew, as I was introduced. I do work at Argo. We work on, digital interface is sort of the broadest term. We do some ID work as well, a variety of different stuff. I collect wine and knowledge and bottle. I have my intro sommelier certificate, proud of that. And then I'm a highly anxious person. If you came to my luncheon, thanks for coming. But for whatever reason, I don't get anxious speaking in front of people, just only in small or party settings, so I'm okay up here. That's me in college. College was transformative years. I was asked to add this photo in, so there you go. This is a shot of our office, not the desks, but we do analog stuff together for fun. We built this race car. It just became street legal last week, so I'm excited to drive it when I get home. We also do analog stuff like make a immersion coffee maker. We're looking to go to production with this. Again, none of this has to do with what we do day in day, but we like to experiment with analog and have fun. And this is my wine cellar here. And this is my desktop. All right, so we got 3. I know, people love that shot. I don't know why. We have 3 sections we're going to get through here. What is AI? And this is going to be a conceptual mind meld. There's a fundamental understanding I want to help bring to us. And then from there, we're going to go a little deeper into sort of anatomy of an agent. And an agent is just an application that uses AI. And then our crescendo, our fun ending point, is this defining moment that I feel that we are at with AI and with design. So the million-dollar question, what is AI? It's complicated. And our relationship with it is complicated. One of the big hurdles is there's all these words. All these words have specific meanings. They're misused and interchangeably. Some of them are scientific meanings. Some of them are just marketing bullshit. but they're all sort of thrown out there in our faces, and we sort of not sure what's what. But for this talk, I want to focus on the home of it, artificial intelligence, and try to get us an understanding of it. It is not a new thing. It's actually 6 decades in the making. Artificial intelligence was coined in the 50s by John McCarthy, and it was this theory and development idea that we could make computer systems that could replicate human cognition, or at least a part of it. And it was an audacious sort of claim thrown out there. They said they would solve AI in a summer. We're here 6 decades later, and we're still just sort of scratching the surface of it. But in the 60s and 70s, they were called the golden years of AI. There was this sort of great success in these early propositions. They were able to recognize objects out of images. There was language-to-language translation. And they were like, we got this thing. With our current trajectory, we're going to have superhuman AI in like 20 years, and it's going to be awesome. And that's where that duality of narrative started. Well, it didn't happen. The 80s is called the winter of AI. And I spared you the Game of Thrones meme here, but their initial suppositions fell flat. They weren't able to achieve what they thought they were. All the funding dissipated. The conversation dried up, except for Hollywood sort of continued that top narrative of what AI might be. But then recently, and actually I sort of atone this to, you always hear the exponential theory. There's also Maslow's theory, and I think it's a little more fitting for this, and it's that as human beings, we tend to overshoot or overestimate near-term impact of technology and underestimate the long-term impact of it. We get super excited about something and hype it up, and it sort of deflates, but then long-term, it actually has a different or more lasting impact than we ever sort of thought, and AI is sort of playing that trend as opposed to the exponential one. The last decade, there's been a resurgence in specifically this idea of machine learning. We have AlphaGo here beating the Go champion. We have Alibaba and Microsoft performing at the Stanford reading and comprehension test, performing at a human level. But here's the thing to remember, is that AlphaGo AI can't take the Stanford research test, or a chess AI can't play AlphaGo. They're not generally intelligent. And this is the core concept I want to give to you guys, is that there's this dual conversation here. There's specialized intelligence, and that's what AI is today. It's able to do one thing, very hyper-focused, and do it very well, and it can't transfer that to anything else. And then you have this more Hollywood idea of general artificial intelligence. That's all hypothetical and still debated. You know, some people say it's inevitable that we'll get there, and maybe we do, but it's not, I don't consider it inevitable. We may get there, but we may not. It's extremely complex. So the example I like to give here is the squirrel. If I were to ask you what's smarter, a squirrel or a human being, most people say, well, human beings are smarter, because our understanding of intelligence is general. We're generally smarter than a squirrel, obviously. But a squirrel has this ability to bury 10,000 or so nuts. And they bury them based on their preference for the nuts, and then they can recall those the next year, and when they're hungry for a certain kind of nut, they know where to go for that. When they're hungry for another kind, they go for that. That's a very specialized intelligence, and at that level, they're much smarter than we are, because I sure as heck couldn't do that. But general intelligence, you know, it's not completely separate from this specialized intelligence. If you take basically a collection of these specialized intelligence and put an abstraction on top of it and allow, basically as a human being, I understand this, and I understand this, and I understand this, and I could put them together, and I could make learnings across all of those and assumptions and understandings. That's general intelligence. It's the foundation of creativity, and that's sort of what makes us uniquely human. That doesn't exist in AI. It's not even in the roadmap yet. It's purely hypothetical. So, good, I think we got that covered. One little nice illustration of that is I could teach an AI speed limit 25 miles an hour. And if that AI is controlling a car, it knows go 25 miles an hour, that's the speed limit. And I could show that AI that sign and this sign. And then if I show it this sign, now all of a sudden there's a concept of school and children, and when children are present, and when children are present in school, AI has no idea. It's been taught that one very specific thing. It understands miles per hour, but now you've introduced all these general concepts. As human beings, we can assemble that quickly. AI has no visibility into that. Completely blows its little mind. So what we're doing in the AI field is we're building lots of little squirrels, each having its own little focus, and they're all doing their little jobs, and there's some very impressive stuff coming out of that. So if you think even like Siri, we try to think maybe Siri is generally intelligent, but she's not. She has sort of a natural language processing that hears what we say, and that's routed to tiny little squirrels, each one responsible for finding us the weather or giving us directions. And each one of those squirrels don't know about the other and doesn't have memory, and there's no way to transfer one knowledge to the other. So there's a bit of an isolation in that. It's sort of important. So let's take a squirrel. This is as deep as we're going to go, and then we're going to have a little more fun towards the end here. But let's open that squirrel up and look at an agent. So this is the work I've been doing for the past 2 years. Creating AI, orchestrating AI has been sort of a black arts up until now. It's all done in code. There's a handful of machine learning experts. Tell your kids to start down that field because they're all getting NFL salaries at the moment. They're in such demand. But I helped create, and Argo helped create a visual tool that actually allows you to orchestrate AI. So if we were to open the application, this is an agent. This is an empty one. This is a new one I've started. This is an application that can use AI, and it currently does absolutely nothing because I just opened it. The basic premise here is that data comes in. I'm going to give it data or multiple sets of data. Data is the raw fuel for AI. I'm going to have a task I want it to do. I'm going to break that task down into these little modular pieces that's going to enrich or transform the data, and the data is going to come back out. So let's take this as an example. Let's make an agent that can say, is it a green shirt? If you're a Silicon Valley fan, this is akin to the is it hot dog? So I open up a blank agent. I'm going to bring in data. I'm going to bring in a product data set. It's going to have product images. There it is coming in. I'm going to break down my task. The first thing I'm going to do is use this component called an image segmenter. It's going to look at the image and then say, what's in the image? Is there a boy in the image? Is there a cat? If there's a person, do they have a shirt on? Are they wearing pants? Do they have sunglasses? So that's a little algorithm that's able to segment it. And from there, I'm going to say, if it has a shirt, then I want you to run color analysis on that. And then I want it to come back out of my agent. So I can say, oh, this image has a shirt and it's green. Perfect. Is it green shirt? Yes. We have an agent. You can build on that then. Context becomes important. So bringing in orchestration, being able to understand the context of users. And then I can go from is it green shirt to say, show me shirts in my favorite color. And it's able then, when I click that, look at a product data set and bring me back colors, shirts in my favorite color. And then from there, feedback is one of the important things. I could tell it it's right, it's wrong, I like that shirt, I don't like that shirt. Feedback continues to let it get smarter. I can say more shirts like this, less shirts like that, or I don't like green shirts anymore, I want blue shirts. And then I'll look in, it goes deeper than that, and I'll sort of spare you that, but you sort of keep going down visually into how these pieces work. And then there's even this sort of timeline view where I can see what the heck did the agent do? It made a suggestion, why did it do that? I can replay that and look back at all that evidence. So there's the why. A little pause here, and we'll come up a little higher. Why the heck are we doing all this? What's the point? And it is to derive knowledge from data. We are at a moment where we have more data than we've ever had before, and we continue to consume more data and generate more data. There is a lot of things we can do great with that, but as human beings, we just can't process all of it. We can't find the patterns or anomalies that we need to, and able to sort of find the most success with that we can. And in that, you have huge data sets in ecology and transportation and healthcare and the workforce. These are all fields that AI begins to tackle and find patterns and anomalies and being able to make suggestions to us that can have profound impacts. So this is our crescendo. We're at this defining moment. And it's a defining moment for AI It's not the first defining moment for AI. It's had its successes and failures. But there's a shift in conversation now in that it's starting to be not just can it be done, but why are we doing it? What's the value? What's the human value? What's the great things that we can achieve with this? And we're seeing that shift in conversation. I've seen it over the last 2 years, especially as the tooling starts to become democratized. And that makes it a fundamentally defining moment for design because we need to be a part of this conversation. Being a part of this technical conversation and steering it to one that we actually derive good value from this. We ask the questions of why and human value and steer this. There's two sort of aspects that I've been working on, the tooling that creates AI and the expressions of it. On the tooling side, the impacts I've seen is that some UI constructs are starting to fade away, that search, sort, and filter, the inevitable question of where I should eat for dinner. If it's me and a couple of people, it'll involve 2 Google searches and Yelp and several calendars, and we try to figure that out. AI maybe help just simplify that and make suggestions for us. Buying a car, I showed you the earlier one where we augmented search. It could get even more sophisticated where it just makes, here's 3 suggestions of what you want, what you need, and what you should buy. And then at the bottom, there's a little slider for between me and my wife. And blend our data sets and see what we come up with. And this is a bit of an abstract one because, again, I can't show a lot of the fintech stuff, but AI in the financial industry is extremely interesting. And then you could even come up further and use AI to find suggestions in efficiencies in the power grid, and then Google's even using AI to help us look at what planets might be interesting to look at. It's able to look at massive data sets again and make suggestions. The key thing in this is aboutness. A lot of times AI gets sort of pointed as it's going to provide the perfect answer, the right answer, and I don't think that's the right approach. AI is very good at aboutness. It's not finding us that needle in the haystack, but it's able to look at just sort of infinite stacks of hay and show us stacks that are interesting that we can take the final look and make decisions on what we should do. And in some instances, like I showed, UI will disappear entirely, like Mimo Adkin. There's no interface to that. And NVIDIA is doing photo retouching with no interface, though I would argue we don't need another way to retouch photos. And there'll be new constructs born. While some of them are disappearing, we're going to see this role. AI has a role. It makes decisions that the original programmer can't fully program or expect. So they have started giving them names. Is it Alexa or Siri? Is AI your brand? Is it just an unknown helper? But as designers, we actually have to express what this name is. And I'm all for the Blade Runner rule in that we should always have AI say that I'm AI, and it shouldn't ever pretend to be a human being. I think that is incredibly important. We have new states that AI will make us design. AI can listen, it can learn, it can be unsure, it can require feedback. It could make mistakes. All of this needs to start showing up in the interface and becomes a lot more than just loading or 404. Data. AI is powered by data, and we should ask permission from our users, and we should ask them again. And when they get tired of us asking, we should keep asking them. And evidence, this becomes a huge part of it, and this is in the infancy, but AI makes decisions. Why did it make that decision? And showing that to the user, allowing the user to see that evidence, extremely important, and there's so much design work to be done here. Mistakes. This one is a little icky. AI can make mistakes, and it's not an error. An error is just when an application fails. A mistake is that on the algorithm, there's a bias to the data, and it suggests something that is profoundly wrong or socially wrong or unacceptable. Google, about 2 years ago, there was a African-American gentleman that searched for gorillas on his phone. Come to find out, Google had put all his friends in that folder. There's a bias in the data set that it was trained mostly on white males. The AI wasn't trying to be racist, it just hadn't seen enough African-American people in its data set to be able to make the right categorization. 2 years later, they haven't fixed it, they just give you a no result state if you search for gorilla. that stuff needs to be worked out, and as designers, we need to have a voice in that. So choose invention wisely in all this new stuff. You don't want to overload users with having to learn all this slick new stuff. Use convention when possible. And on the tooling side, again, there's just so much to be done. There's this orchestration, there's marketplaces to be stood up, performance, metrics, and this is DARPA's 10-year road plan of bringing explanation into artificial intelligence. None of this stuff has been designed yet. There's so much work to be done. So for us as designers, I see it life beyond pixel pushing. I see myself more as an orchestrator of data and information now, and it's kind of exciting. There's all this great data out there that we don't usually as designers dig into that could be super helpful. We start to try to visualize it, but I'm looking forward to the point where I'm in my Sketch or my Photoshop, and the latest usability stuff is being worked on by AI, and it's making suggestions to me while I'm working in Sketch. I'm doing something, it's saying, I have 3 alternative layouts you should consider. In that sense, it's being done in the fashion industry too, where fashion designers can pull upon hundreds of thousands of photos and say, I want to be inspired by a 1950s red dress, and it brings all this information up to you. In that sense, I think you become, honestly, I came to this slide about 3 days ago, and I think my next talk will be this specifically, but AI is going to become our ultimate brainstorm partner. It's able to look at such massive sets of data and show us stuff that it might be interesting, and then we're able to take that last mile of say, no, that's not, but that is, and this is, and we make that general cognition and connection to those and come up with sort of even new things we'd never thought of. So bring back Clippy here. All right, so closing here, and I thought it was great that Debbie opened with this idea of democratization. She's talking about branding. I'm seeing this similar thing with AI here. The tooling is starting to democratize, the innovation is picking up. This is not the first time we've seen this with technology. This is 1998 front page, that moment where you could visually create a website and the democratization of that. It was a profound moment. And just a couple years later, 2004, this guy made this thing called Facebook, which turns out to be one of the most influential and connecting platforms we've ever seen in humanity. And so much great has come from that. And also, that democratization helped create Facebook, which has challenged our social norms, has made us look inward and try to decide what is acceptable to us, what is important to us, what is the human value in all of this that we're doing. AI is already down this path. It's showing great results in being able to look at brain scans quickly and faster than doctors can. And then AI is being used in China to track its citizens and find them for jaywalking and other offenses. The democratization of AI will bring about many Facebook moments. It will challenge us. We could all say maybe we should just try to stop it, but humanity's never stopped the progression of technology. It's become something more profound than nature itself. So I actually think Stephen Hawking had it right. AI will be either the best or worst thing that happened to humanity, and it's not AI that's either of those things, it's us as human beings. We will bring the best or worst of it, as we always have traditionally done with technology. So my mantra for me has just been, why fear the worst and sit back when you can help design the best? And that's my goal in working with AI, and I hope I could inspire some of you to join along with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Don, I'm going to be inspired by you. I'd like to use a little cognitive intelligence and wonder if we want to kind of keep this going with some questions from the audience, or is it now Sunday afternoon? You tell me. We have a question. You ready for that?
Sure, let's do it.
Good.
Summarization, how you got into and what was your first interaction with AI and what was your background getting there to this position at least?
That's a great question. I tend to work in emerging media and tech. I started in AI 2 years ago. I knew very little about it. The client that I work with is Cognitive Scale. They are the two founders. One was the original general manager of Watson, and the other gentleman was one of the original architects of Watson. They have their names on most of the patents. They left IBM about 4 years ago and started this company. So I joined them. They had this vision of creating a visual tool, basically a first ever for AI. My first month with them, I would sit with the CTO and he would explain to me what AI was, and I would try to repeat back to him, and I got most of it wrong. We actually spent a month together trying to come up with a common vocabulary. It was like two people speaking two different languages, and we just sort of continued to work on that. And we found to them as an organization, there wasn't enough architecture there, that even their own engineers had different names and vernacular for things. So we came in and it's sort of like creating Windows in the sense we had to name the file and folder and all those sort of little pieces. So in that, we just sort of, they learned more about design and I learned about AI and just sort of continued down that path to where I am now. So my prior knowledge was little to none about 2 years ago.
Hi. So I have a question. I know that in the past they've tried to create AI, with Microsoft, and they've used it, like chatbots with Twitter, and because they've been learning through people, they've learned a lot of social biases. Do you think there's any good way to try to get around that and to prevent that from happening in the future? Because I know if we have it keep learning through, the internet, and a lot of the things that get thrown around, they're very negative.
Yeah, absolutely, which is kind of sad for us as human beings, but there's going to be, in the next several years, sort of a democratization of the data sets, the underlying and the algorithms, and with that will come a lot of transparency. If these things are used more in a marketplace, they'll be rated by peers. Those biases will be challenged. People will be forced to get better at that. And then the longer term is some of the DARPA stuff I was showing you, where inside those sort of smallest molecules of decision making are black boxes right now. They're asking, basically, as engineers, we need to go back and open that box. And when an AI makes a decision, it says, I decided this, and here's why I didn't do this, and this is what I was thinking, sort of exposing all of that. So it's going to be a re-architecture of the fundamentals of AI, and it's going to be a transparency and democratization marketplace of the AI components so that we can have people basically rate those things so that the biases, sort of diminish and work their way out.
I don't want to give you the impression you can't have a seat, so if you want to sit down.
That's all right. I enjoy standing.
Susan.
Mic drop, we're out.
Dave, really. Matthew, as a result of recent events and then the congressional hearings, all the things that have come forward about Facebook and leadership being, how did they put it, naive or, about the potential harm.
Yeah.
How do we go forward? I mean, are human beings naive in that way? I mean, just seeing the good potential? Is it typical of Americans more than other countries? How do we go forward being cautious? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's definitely the naivety. I don't want to pin it on Silicon Valley, but it is, the blue sky area. Everything is going to be great. I think technology, we're still sort of in our infancy of technology having the profound impact on humanity that it does now. We've had more of the industrial impact, but now we're seeing the social impacts of technology, and we're very new to experiencing that. So sort of as I was saying at the end, we're going to have more of those moments and naiveties, and there's going to be growing pains with it. So I guess my call is that as designers, we need to just be involved more at the ground level so that we can raise our hands and try to steer this thing. Like I was saying too, we've never as humanity sort of stopped the progress of a technology, so trying to abandon this is not really a solution either. So we just need to do our best to find the best in it. It's not a great answer to your question, but sort of we're all learning this together, and transparency is probably the best key to what we can do. Yeah.
Hi, Matthew. Right here. My name is Hiba, and recently I've gotten interested in conversational UI, which seems very similar to AI, especially with what you showcase. And I noticed in your presentation there was a program you were using. Is that the program that you were brought on to work on? And is that available to the public? And that's part one. And part two is if somebody is interested in getting into this field, what would you recommend? How can they expand their knowledge on designing for AI?
Yeah, so first part of the question, the TrueCar work predates the cognitive scale interface work. Sorry, what was the beginning part of that question? Yeah, so that was pure, that's more of the Wild West. So working with engineers and ML experts, that company has huge data sets. So that was all, it wasn't a visual interface for building that. The final result was visual, obviously. A side tangent to conversational search, one that we sort of were challenged with in that interface is that, and this is very important for AI too, is the uncanny valley of it. Like, you have to understand your squirrel really well. It's going to be very good at certain things and very terrible at other things. Again, it's that isolated task. And as designers, you need to emphasize the things it's good at and de-emphasize the things that it's not good at. I think Siri is sort of not a great example of that, because in that voice interaction, you expect her to do and understand everything. And the same thing with chat, conversational chat, you expect, I'm chatting with this thing, it should do everything for me. And you sort of quickly become dismayed with it not being able to do that. That's why we chose the approach of just using search and then having it build dynamic decision trees and not putting you into this sort of awkward chat with it or black boxing into you into questions and then it's spitting out answers you're not sure why, sort of trying to make it as transparent as possible. And then the second part of your question, how do you get involved? It depends on basically how technically minded you are. There's tons of resources if you are. Just started to look at a lot of the open source stuff like Google's Tensor. On the design side, there's just not a ton of resources yet. I guess looking at, I don't know, looking at Google and Google's TensorFlow, there's a lot of good examples in there. Other than that, it's just sort of a technical place where there's just not a lot of visual help yet. I guess that's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing, is to try to bring some of that. So not a great answer to your question. But yeah. Yeah, for sure. I would always, just the one caveat I would say there is that don't use AI and try to find a solution for it, but as you're trying to solve things, if they involve large data or finding patterns or anomalies in decision making, maybe AI can help you, but don't say that I want to do something with AI. It's sort of a backwards approach to it.
Is it true that I read that there's an attempt now to have Alexa answer every single question ever? And if that's true, how many squirrels will that take?
So many squirrels. I feel like Google would be better at serving that. They have so many answers already. I don't know if that Amazon could answer every e-commerce question you ever had. Maybe Google would be better at answering. That's why AI is sort of it's being called the next space race, in the sense, and you're actually seeing geopolitical lines being divided between Europe, US, and China. Is seen as such a pivotal thing, and data is that fuel for it. So Europe's looking to protect all their data. so that it can't cross servers from Europe to US. And US is we're sort of maybe less loose with our data, and then China sort of as well. Everyone's sort of positioning themselves in that. It's kind of interesting to see that. If you, the French just released this 120-page document on their stance of we should be the best at AI because we have all these mathematicians, and we shouldn't let the U.S. define what we're doing anymore. So it's a great read. It's a really dry read, but it's a good read.
Hi, my name is Zach, first-time conference attendee, long-time silly question asker.
Sweet.
My question is, do AI platforms need to have creepy Hal-esque voices?
Totally. I think that'd be great. You should be able to choose what voice you want to give to it.
So, question for everybody in the world. Are you going to put together a book, AI, the natural language, so we have a common common wordings for everything? It would be awesome.
Yeah, we do have, it doesn't exist yet. We do have a book we released as a company, Voices in AI. It's conversations with some of my colleagues and some other people. But yes, that vernacular it's still shaping. But I would say in the next year or so, that stuff starts to coalesce. So definitely, yeah.
Hello. How do you deal with liability, like people wanting to sue companies saying, you said this was the best car choice, but really, like, I got into an accident or something, and it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for your suggestion? So things like that, like, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the whole pre-AI personalization probably handles a lot of that already. I mean, a lot of that stuff shows up as asterisks or in the user agreement and such. Though interesting, maybe less in the car purchasing, but it's that idea of mistakes that I was talking about as opposed to errors. I mean, what if I have an app that does image recognition on mushrooms I can eat, and it gets one wrong, and it's a poisonous mushroom and I die? Like, who's at fault for that? And honestly, we haven't hit there yet, but we're coming to a point quickly where all the lawyers are going to get involved. I think it will slow innovation down for AI, because there is this idea of, all right, who's liable? Is it the person that wrote the algorithm? Is it the person that deployed the algorithm? Is it the designer? Were they not clear enough? Are we on the hook? There's the whole ethical question for cars. If a car has to make a choice, the trolley example, Mercedes has already said that they are going to take the approach that the car will protect the driver over any other accident. There's a lot of interesting ethical questions that we're going to have to deal with. This is probably the closest and the most intimate seat at the table that designers will have with these questions. Lawyers and religious figures and other people have had to deal with these ethical issues before. And I think for the first time as designers, we're going to have to sort of come up with our own ethical code of how do we want to participate in this, which I think could be pretty interesting.
Hi. So going back to the bias issue, as an emerging industry, is there a conversation around having diversity in the room where it happens, in the room where it's made, so those biases are less frequent?
Yeah, it's actually tacking onto the general tech bias in general. AI is actually just shining a spotlight on how bad some of it is. So those conversations are starting to happen. Maybe in a sense, AI is actually helping speed that up a little bit. So yeah, that's definitely and I think AI has finally hit a maturity point where it's not just cute, fun, dumb things anymore or playing chess, that it's starting to solve real world problems that we're like, hey, now, all right, well, now we have to get into the weeds and solve some of these more interesting, challenging things, bias being a huge one.
I don't I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how to put this, but I think there's a fear amongst people
Yeah.
of what's going on. You must be thinking about how to deal with people's fear.
Yeah.
How are you dealing with it?
Part of this talk is for that. A lot of fear comes from that duality in conversation. So much of the mislabeling of this sentient AI that's going to uprise and do all these terrible things, just not real. There's no basis in reality. That doesn't exist. AI is much more of this focused thing. So education, we tend to fear things that we don't fully understand, and the headlines and people click on things that seem scarier. So that stuff gets risen to the top. And the reality of AI is just, at the moment, is a lot less scary. It's these very specific things that it does. And if you don't give it the keys, if you have this sort of unproven AI, don't have it run your power grid, or an unproven AI, don't have it run an autonomous drone that has weapons on it. Like, there's just simple things you can do as we learn with it. AI can't do anything if you turn it off. So the reality of it is a lot less scary than what sort of gets painted in the Hollywood tabloid. Yeah. Education is the simple answer.
Well, the microphone has been passed to our esteemed president of the chapter. I'm going to take that as a cue. So let's thank Matthew. Oh.
First, it's a statement. I loved your metaphor of the squirrels.
Thank you.
But I think I saw a chipmunk in there.
I only have the emojis to pull from. So we need to get squirrel added to the emoji catalog.
Okay. I think
Thank you.